Alright, so it's finally warm enough out here to do a little bit more recording, so yay, out of the house for a little while. This place is a mess, but we'll see what we can do. We've been doing some home renovation projects, so it's a bit chaotic around here, but in all cases, I've got a laptop review for you today. It's not a super official one, and good news is you don't have to take my word for it. You can do your own research if you really want to. I want to talk about a laptop that I took off of a parts pile for free, and I've actually done some improvements to it since I've gotten it. I've installed Linux on it, and I've had pretty decent time with it, although it's not a laptop that I would recommend, so we'll get into it. So, this is the laptop. It is a Dell Latitude E6440. Its kind of claim to fame is being a real tweener series, because it was after the big green metallic base systems of before, but it also wasn't the, well, what's left of this one, the Ultrabooks that came after it. And no, for those wondering, that laptop does not work, like many other things. And I do have one of the older boys in storage down here, but I'm not getting it out because it's moldy. That's a long story. It spent some extra time at my parents' house, but it carried me through college, so I've decided to let its corpse rot in my garage rather than at the bottom of an e-fill waste center. So, to summarize this thing, go ahead and unplug the charger, and I do have an extended battery for it. This thing's got actually a pretty decent selection. A DVD drive for those that know what those are. Wi-Fi switch, smart card reader, very early on smart card stuff. USBs, I believe those are both 3.0 ports at this point in life. A headphone jack for the millennials that still remember those. Kensington lock. You've got on the back here, even greater selection. We've got a USB 3 that's also a powered port. Built-in Ethernet for those that use that, which I am one that does regularly take advantage of that. And over here we've got an full-size HDMI, Dell's PA12 power jack, PA10 and PA12 actually, that they've used for literally decades. And they're only just now going away from it, which makes me sad. And finally, exhaust, which this thing desperately needs. A USB 2 port, and a built-on VGA, also known as a prehistoric port, for those that want to call it that. I am okay with calling it a prehistoric port. I don't think anything uses it anymore. And on the front, I do have an SD card reader. I got a little cover in it here. I've actually used this card reader. It's not bad. If we open the laptop, we can see it's that traditional Dell out of this generation of laptop and whatnot. I can pull that up. It's got this rubberized coating, which is sadly starting to deteriorate. A lot of laptops of this generation, they found these petroleum-based coatings like this like to turn back into being a really sticky, rubbery substance. This one's not in too bad a shape. My wife's 6430 is not so lucky. It's probably about 20% of the way there, becoming a sticky mess. The one I have down there in the storage is completely gone. And I have e-wasted one not that long ago that was in real tough shape, a 6430 that unfortunately suffered mainboard failure on board. But it was also the dual graphics model. This is also a dual graphics model, and we'll get into that here in a second. But you can see this one, if I scroll up, has a webcam. And this was actually working when I picked it up. You can see the bezel doesn't quite want to go back in. I had to snap this thing apart. Here about 2 weeks ago, I was on a live stream with this laptop. It just happened to be nearby. And for whatever reason, this webcam stopped working. I don't know why. And the microphone quit working, so I just Bluetoothed a headphone, went through my business, said, oh, the webcam module probably just died. I'll just snap this bezel apart here, take a look at it. No, after all the years, this is about a circa 2014 machine. After all these years, it just up and decided to be unplugged. It was unplugged by maybe a millimeter. I mean, just barely enough to not make connection, which is why it was sort of working before. So this is all just held on with clips. Popped that off, reconnected the module, cleaned the lens, snapped the trim ring back on. Webcam works beautifully. Already an improvement. And I'm not going to get super into it here, but if you did tear this thing down, it's literally the easiest thing ever to work on. Take the battery out, screw, 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 and screw. Bottom cover comes off. And from there, you get access to the internals and everything. And that just makes things super easy to work on. So hopefully you can see just 2 latches, and the battery will roll out. I actually have an extended battery. Oh, of course I grabbed the wrong screwdriver. Well, we'll get the definitely not the LTT screwdriver. This is the cheap Harbor Freight Special. And we're going to drive the screw the wrong way, because that's how you do it. You strip the screw out before you take it out. That's how you actually get work done. Now, a fun thing to note here as I get these out is the short one goes over here. And while you do have to take this screw out for the hard drive, you do not, in fact, have to remove the hard drive necessarily to get the bottom plate out. And then she just pops right off. And as you can see, she's pretty interesting inside. Laptops of today aren't really this upgradable. I have a new clock battery. I have an Intel Wi-Fi card. I did replace this card. It did have an Intel card before, but I was having connectivity problems. I think it was just these antennae had needed reconnected, but while I was here, I went ahead and put a newer Wi-Fi card in it. I've got my internal SATA SSD here. DVD drive here, which you could get a DVD to SATA converter. Put a hard drive over here if you wanted to. I have access to my memory here. I've got 2 sticks. This thing will see up to 16 gigabytes of RAM very easily. And you've got your socketed Intel Core i7 processor here. This is a 4th gen with the Radeon dedicated graphics right over here. Blower style cooler, and it all comes apart nice and neat. Really working on this thing is a joy, to be honest, compared to a lot of computers today. Very solid machine. Cooling is still a problem because this is all the cooling for, it's one heat pipe for both, and it's not really enough. So, and one thing to note when you're putting this back together, you gotta watch the SD card reader here too. You gotta put the front on first and then lean it in, and then it'll sort of click. It doesn't really click, but it sort of clicks. And I would tell you what the warranty status on this is. I do like to look up the service tags, and maybe we'll go into the BIOS here in a second and I'll pull up the warranty information on this boy. Dell still does keep track of that stuff for whatever reason. And so here we go with the... Now I do go a little crazy on those. But also my rule of thumb is to never use power tools on electronics. Because it's not a good idea. Okay. Now that we got that craziness out of the way, it is time. Make sure you're at least in frame for this. High from the matte screen. Go ahead and fire this boy up, and I'm going to go ahead and press F2. We're going to go into BIOS. The secret is look for drivers and then come over here and pull up the service tag. And as you can see, this is a November 2018 expiration, which really wasn't, I mean, that's 7 years ago, do the math, but still, pretty nice. And you can view product specifications still. I love that Dell still does this. You can see exactly how it was ordered from the factory, see if there's been any upgrades. We did have an Intel wireless module before, and things like that. And we do have a Radeon discrete GPU, which is kind of cool. So you can go in here and you can see the service details. There was on-site coverage, but it looks like this thing never yeah, that didn't go anywhere. Pretty much never did go anywhere. Yeah, you can look up parts and repairs and whatnot, but that's pretty much all I wanted to do with that one. The spec sheet, I've got it here. What we've got here is the Core i7-4610M. So we've got and we did come with Windows 7. Processor options for this, I'm guessing that i7 is probably the high-end option. I don't know what hard drive it came with, but we've got a 250 gig SSD in it because that's what I had. And pretty much nothing else really interesting on this sheet. The DVD-ROM drive, the high-quality speakers, there's something. I'm not going to say that they're super great. Yeah, there you go. DDR3L up to 16 gigabytes. It's the QM70 mobile chipset. And we have the optional 8690M graphics. It's 2 gigabytes of dedicated graphics. That's not bad. It's really not bad. And this thing was a certified Ubuntu device, so Linux does work on here, which is what I have on it. And we also have the 14-inch 1600 by 900 display. I'm going to be honest here. I'm going to be Linus right now. I don't have a copyright-free way to do this, so I've always seen LTT do this, so we're just going to load up CrabRave and demonstrate the speakers for you. It's about 50%. You can tell it's really not terrible, but it's not great. So keep in mind, this is at 50% volume. It's got a little pop to it, it's not terrible, and if I go to 100%, it's really loud and tinny. 70 is probably about as loud as you'd want to go, but 50 doesn't sound too bad. So I'll be back when that decides to install, and we'll view gaming performance off Super Tux Kart, my favorite. And I do apologize, the glare is, not the best. The screen is okay, but it ain't fancy. So, as you can see, it'll run pretty darn good. If I go in here to system information, we've got that 4610M and that Intel graphics, and then also if I pull up NeoFetch, you can see we've got that Radeon dedicated graphics. It actually makes this thing run pretty darn well. In fact, give me just a moment and I can demonstrate that. Sweet. So now that we have this loaded, it is worth noting that this laptop does run quite hot. It's one of the reasons why I don't use it a lot and why I don't really push the hardware too much, and you'll see why in a moment. So we're going to keep an eye on that. Go to settings, graphics. Accept. We're going to play this at full resolution. And the only way I know how to do things is just play them on maximum settings. So single player, we'll take Tux. We're a novice. And we're gonna do a normal race. Oh, one thing. And there's already heat coming out the side. Display FPS. And if you're expecting this to be a professional setup, the answer is no. We're going to do this first track, and we're going to drive. So far at maximum settings, we're doing about 27 FPS. Now, I don't know that this is necessarily on the Radeon graphics. This could be on the Intel graphics, and there's one way to find out. This is probably a game I would play on moderate settings on here. Yeah, looks like about it. Looks like about 28 FPS is probably about what we can hope for. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a benchmark. I could pull up 2D games and whatnot. They probably run just fine. I've done some GIMP editing and whatnot on here. That works fine. For reasonable productivity through Inkscape, GIMP, those kind of things. Sure of it. This thing overheats like you won't believe. It is a hot mother, to say the least. So, for what it's worth, keep that in mind. There's heat pouring out of the side of this thing right now, and she runs about 90 degrees under load. And I will say, if you do like the video, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button, smash the subscribe button, and tell me what you want to see out of this channel sometimes. You know, I like to hear people's thoughts and feedback and whatnot. I do my Linuxy things, but I do many other things too, so I'm hoping to recase this one soon, so stay tuned. I've got the case sitting right here in the backdrop. It's my old gamer case, and we'll just see what we can do about that. Cheers!